So, who here has ever pitched a game to someone, to a publisher, to anyone? Who here wants to pitch a game to someone? Good. So, this presentation is a weird one. For those who don't know me, I've been a gamer for like 30 years, and we actually started out as a developer over 12 years ago. And we had to before Steam opened, before consoles opened, we had to pitch our game to the community to get noticed, and then we went through Steam Greenlight, and we actually had a publishing deal. Read up on TinyBuild and Buka, B-U-K-A, if you want to read about that, or just search for my name if you want to see a lot of different controversies that we get into over the years. But today we're talking about pitching games. This topic has been evolving a lot since we've been pitching for years now. If you go to tinybuild.com, the most latest version of this presentation will be on there. So if you're watching on YouTube 5 years later, just go to tinybuild.com or just search for my GI Biz article, How to Pitch Your Indie Game, which focuses on the indie side of things. But today we're faced with an interesting context because for the first time in many years, we are facing a recession. And I assume that many people here in the audience and many people watching are going to be younger than 40 years old. Because if you're over 40, you have seen different recessions in the games industry. But if you're younger than that, then this is a shocker a little bit. It was definitely a shocker for me. And it's a thing that we have to navigate through. But I think the context here is super important because the number of Steam games released every year is still growing quite rapidly. Here are the latest numbers for 2023, and the small graph over there, which you can actually see quite clearly, good job me, is AAA games versus indie games. And AAA is essentially, everything budget over 50 million, give or take. So it's still growing. And the games industry has become extremely overfunded over the last couple of years. If you remember last year over here, the amounts of job postings, there was no space for them. Everyone was hiring, and right now, no one is hiring, and we're seeing a lot of layoffs. Well, the context of how we got there, I think, is really clearly visible in this graph, and this is a website called Statista.com. That's where I grabbed these snapshots from. It was quite difficult to understand the overall scope of the industry. There are different numbers here and there on the amount of funding. But this is US-based funding, and you can see the jump in 2020, and the data here was until November, so it wasn't even full year data. So we went through 3 years of extreme funding in the games industry, while everyone was working remotely. And I remember the excitement, how everyone was like, yay, let's work remotely, you don't need to wear pants. And then a year into that, you realize that you haven't shaved or socially interacted with anyone. And when you don't make your bed in the morning, this is a little psychological thing, you actually need a goal in the morning. If you achieve a small goal when you wake up, you feel better the whole day. Try it, try to make your bed. And what we've noticed, at least internally and working with colleagues, is that building remote teams at scale is extremely difficult. People whom you've had an established pre-pandemic relationship, those teams were able to function. But when you hire so many people, when you don't have the basic human interaction, like, oh, hey, what did you do this weekend? Over the coffee machine. Oh, you're also into this hobby. Yeah, I love that. Let's just establish trust between teammates remotely. That has been an extreme challenge. And this is actually like a side comment. I do believe in offices. Please hate me on Twitter. I love when I get hate likes and hate reposts, but offices build relationship. We've actually been, the one thing that we've invested a lot in is great locations. Because building trust and connections, if you're able to do that while also having a work-life balance situation for people, like this is a snapshot, our office is actually right behind this building in Hilversum, the Netherlands. If you're able to make a work-lifestyle balance for your people, then they will be more happy and will separate work and personal life, which is very important in the context of working remotely for 3 years. And this is the one thing that I wish we had invested more into before we got into the recession. Then the other factor here was, well, right now keeping money in the bank is just much safer. You know, you get a high interest rate. Why would you want to invest into games? And because of all of these factors, it's becoming extremely difficult to find funding for the 5 to 35 million. Essentially, going over indie or like indie-ish, going into the AA space, there is no funding for that because usually, if you are an established studio, your burn rate is much higher than this. So you go into the tens upon tens of millions, and if you are below, let's say 30 million, you're in this weird spot where you just have no ability to find funding. So in today's talk, we're actually going to be focusing on how to pitch your game in an under $5 million budget. And this budget is actually quite widespread depending on where you are. Everyone who is here in Poland understands the kind of like the cost of goods here and can adjust, but a budget of 5 million in the US may not get you in the same spot as here. So let's just assume it's an indie game or a sub-AA game that you're pitching. So with this context, let's start with what to pitch. This is something that you should spend the most time on doing, and we will discuss in this presentation on what you should and should not do. Obligatory terrible AI art was a prompt that says video game characters pitching something. Made this in about 2 minutes. But really the questions when deciding what to pitch you should be asking is, what are people playing? What do you love playing? And what can you actually make? The answer of what to pitch will be somewhere in the middle over there. And you shouldn't do it in isolation. I actually use a lot of different tools on a daily basis. For example, Steam Charts is my favorite website. It's pretty much my most visited one. Just go to Steam Charts every day or set up alerts to see what is trending. And I recommend not going just to the top 10 because it will be all free-to-play stuff, but just go into the top 50 and see like where the trends are, what is trending all of a sudden. It's super interesting to see a game that may be like 7 years old suddenly start trending upwards. Or start falling all of a sudden. Like we've seen how Pal World has gone down in CCU numbers. It's not my job to gloat on that, but it's super interesting as to why. And I want to hear a presentation from their game designers as to why that happened and where is the drop-off point in that game. We'll get back to the point of about time, because I do believe that time in game is the most valuable KPI that we have. I also use steamdb.info daily, and this is something for people who are pitching a game that already has a Steam page is super important, because what I'm looking for when I look at your game that has a Steam page is the follower number on the SteamDB chart. And if that follower number is growing like steadily, it doesn't have to be big growth, it doesn't have to be like spikes, but if it's growing steadily, it tells me that the algorithm is matching your game to the right people on Steam, therefore it is accumulating followers, and therefore accumulating wish lists. So what we want is that kind of growth, because then a publisher or a fund or a marketing agency, a partner, anyone can essentially light that fire. You already have a flame, and we just pour some fuel onto it. And this is when it gets tricky of announced and unannounced games. We'll get back to that. But use SteamDB.info daily just to see what is trending, what kind of stats you can get, and how does your game look on that if you have a Steam page. And the other one is Steam's top wishlists. This has actually proven quite useful. You can easily see what people are excited about. And if you look at the top 100, give or take, you will start seeing a lot of patterns. You will start seeing what kind of games are coming up. And as Fozzie was saying in the previous presentation, like, why are there 5 games that look exactly the same coming out? Well, you can see exactly what kind of games are upcoming and what kind of games are trending organically on Steam. So use a top wishlist page. You just search for Steam top wishlist on Google, and it's going to be the top result. I will use an example here that many people have recently seen of Kingmakers. It's a game that we announced, I think it was last week. Yeah, it was just over a week ago. And The example there is, I think, the perfect pitch of what to pitch to us and to pretty much everyone. The pitch had similar gifts to this, and the premise is quite simple. You have 4,000 units on screen, and it's all physics-based, and you have modern weapons, right? The team behind it is the first thing that we looked at after seeing the pitch, because they shipped a game called Road Redemption. So make sure to include your credentials. It doesn't matter if your game was successful or not. These guys did have a successful game. Just include it. If it's positive ratings, great. If it's not positive ratings, you still ship the game. Don't be shy about shipping game. I see a lot of developers come to us and go, yeah, I shipped, like some stuff like, oh, what did you ship? Oh, like 20 games on mobile. I'm like, that's great. Shipping titles, it doesn't matter if they're successful or not, it's very important. So when we looked at the pitch, we had the combination of, okay, we have a developer that has shipped the game, and then we have these amazing shots of thousands of units on screen. So when we did our research, we found a lot of viral videos like these, when you have 4,000 chickens versus 20,000 zombies in Ultimate Epic Battle Sim. There were similar games like Totally Accurate Battle Simulator out there. And they all had a lot of viral marketing, so it's essentially free marketing from YouTubers. But what they did not have is direct control over the units, because that is what we have. We have a third-person shooter where you directly control the units with some RTS elements that we'll get into later. So we knew that there is a market for that, and we knew that there is a unique proposition. And then the pitch, the way that we made it, is essentially Call of Duty meets Back to the Future, and multiple variations of that. And we had this theory that the so-called money shot from the trailer, where you get transported back to the future, and we're still trying to figure out the name of this truck. It's very not safe for work on the latest candidates. But we had a theory that if this shot is in the trailer at about 20-ish seconds, a lot of people will want to share it, and therefore the algorithms on social media will pick it up pretty much everywhere, on Facebook, on Reddit, on X, on whatever chat you use these days. And people will want to share it and say like, hey, you have to watch this until the end, so that people get to the 20-second mark. And therefore it gets recommended to everyone. So let me just show you the trailer. Oh, yeah. So if you see the amount of views over here just on Twitter, it's 17 million. I believe it's in the hundreds of millions right now across all social media. So let's just see the trailer, because this was kind of part of the pitch. The original trailer I will not show you that we had. That was part of the pitch, but the idea, the spirit of it is still the same. Therefore, it gave us a path to marketing. So let's take a look.
We don't know where he came from, but I'll tell you, he built our village into a city. He's the one who trained our army, who grew us into an empire. I don't know where he's from, but if you think you can stop him, you're already dead. Our people a future. I hope he can save his own.
So you can kind of, thank you. We worked really hard on that trailer. But you can kind of see that if a version of this was in the pitch, you would get excited. as a publisher or as a funding partner and whatnot. And we got really excited because this pitch hit all of the marks. It's unique tech, it's a unique pitch setting, there's a joke, there's a team with a history of shipping tiles, and also a very clear path to marketing. Because I don't know about you, but if I was a player and I saw the trailer, I would have a lot of questions. Like, how does this work? What's the core game loop? What's the RTS part of it, etc.? And all of that will be implemented into the milestone schedule of this project because devlogs are really interesting in this game. And it kind of builds that whole path to release where we don't have to worry about marketing. So what a publisher today wants is either an unannounced pitch that has a really clear path to marketing or an announced game that does get traction. So should your game be announced? It really depends. For years, platforms have told us, think like the big platform holders, we want unannounced games, bring them early. But unannounced games don't have any traction, therefore you don't have much leverage. And believe it or not, we did show this trailer to a lot of partners, and until it blows up, people aren't as excited. And that's just human behavior. You can't do that. You can't do anything with that. But what I will tell you is that viral content does get you funding. This little GIF here from No Time to Explain is our very first game that we launched in 2011. God, I'm old. But it did get us funding on Kickstarter. It did get us a publishing deal. It did go viral before all of that. And we didn't have a game. It was just a flash animation at that point. Another example is Potioncraft here, which I will talk a little bit more detail, but many of our games that, especially on the smaller budget side, they were tested early and they got traction. Or they got to an iteration of themselves that got traction after failing initially. So the case of Potioncraft is actually quite curious because it completely bombed with devlogs. If you find the early devlogs, they have a couple of hundred views, but it absolutely blew up with GIFs everywhere. And the GIF here is just it's so tactile. You really want to touch this game. You want to see how it feels. And it shipped with over 1 million wishlists, and it's the first game that got us into the Steam header when we launched 1.0 a year ago in December. Also, being influencer verified will go a very long way. This is an example of people playing a game called Happy's Humble Burger Barn. Very simple name to pronounce. And what happened here is there was a free prototype on itch that blew up on YouTube. It had maybe an hour of gameplay. The premise is that you work in a fast food restaurant that's haunted by monsters, so essentially at McDonald's. And when we played the pitch, we're like talking to the dev team, we're like, okay, well, what is the bigger game around this? And then the meta around there was that the final game is a much bigger version of the original, but the events of the original, of the free itch.io prototype, actually happen in the game. Like the levels from the prototype are in there. So we were able to build a marketing meta around that with a very deep story around the prototype and create a commercially successful game. Let me show you the trailer for what was the final release trailer, and then you can get an idea of what the pitch looked like as well.
しょう。
So, when people say that they don't do unannounced games, they're telling you that because they will want to announce it, or unless it gets traction. I mean, it's just human nature. But the example of Happy's Humble, I think, is one of my favorite ones because talking about originality from the previous presentation, yeah, that looks really weird. But it already had a core game loop. The team has shown that they're able to ship games, and it was their game number 7 or 8, I believe, after doing a lot of small prototypes. So, announcing and verifying your vision is key. I do believe that. And especially today when the competition for any kind of funding is so severe, just announce something and see if it flies. Just take it to TikTok. I do recommend verifying your materials and actually not being afraid of failing here, because what we do with this Tiny Build Secrets 101 here is we will post a lot of TikToks on random accounts with very low followers just to see will the first couple of frames capture people's attention. If we then fully announce the game, we already know we have A/B tested a lot of materials. So do the same with your pitch. Try to reach out to influencers. Try to see what kind of response you get. Try to do devlogs. There's no single universal path for announcing a game in this way. Just try everything and see what works. And if it doesn't work, then odds are you're either have some issues with your pitch, which is good information, or maybe that the product is not finding an audience, maybe there is no audience, or maybe that you should search elsewhere. So external verification is just very, very important these days. So let's move on. How do you actually pitch a game? So there are 4 key components, I believe. And the 4th is kind of optional, in my opinion, which is kind of, I guess, controversial. The first thing you need is a great title. What are you going to put in your email title? What are you going to put in the title when you reach out to influencers? What is the snappy one-liner, right? Then the second one is a great GIF. And by GIF today, I mean not necessarily the format, right? It's just short video, that you can embed into an email in GIF format. Then you actually need a really, really good video. We will talk about that in detail. And the build, it can be okay, but to be honest, with many of the games that I talked about, we did not have builds when we signed the games, because we knew that there was traction, and then building a game is, I don't want to say easy, but it's much more predictable than predicting if you're going to build something, if it gets traction or not. So what's a great elevator pitch? Still, to this day, my probably favorite one is Fishing with Machine Guns by Rami Ismail for ridiculous fishing. And more recently, we have re-announced a game called Level 0 Extraction. I know, super original name, but it's Tarkov meets Alien Isolation. Right? If the pitch was, we announced that this game is now an extraction shooter, no one would care. That's actually what PC Gamer wrote about this announcement. But everyone gets the idea that it's Tarkov, as in Escape from Tarkov, it's an extraction shooter, you don't need to say that, meets Alien Isolation. And your imagination kind of runs wild there. So it needs to be very short. Your elevator pitch just needs to capture the attention. And don't be shy about using other games as examples. One of our games, Streets of Rogue, literally on Steam it says it's GTA meets Nuclear Throne and goes completely insane. And we haven't gotten sued yet. So just be original, right? No one cares if it's another thing that people have seen, right? And to people watching on YouTube, there was a presentation that should go online right before this one on the same DevGam channel about originality that touches on a lot of these points. Now, making a great GIF is actually art, I believe. I personally spend a lot of time on retooling them, on figuring out how to make something super snappy and capture attention. And it used to be that it was actual GIFs, so you would be restricted by size of about 5 megabytes. Today, GIFs are used mostly for email itself, and then on all other platforms it's short-term video, but the principle is still the same. What you need to pay attention to is, with a GIF, most of the time it will be viewed on the phone. Like I'd say that about 90% of our views on our own YouTube channel are from phones, and when they are not from phones, it's because it's impossible to watch on the phone. So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. But really, you need to think from an ADD perspective, like when you have an attention deficit disorder, because you have between 1 and 3 seconds to capture someone's attention. This is actually why it was so risky to go for the trailer for Kingmakers that I showed you guys earlier. Because holding someone's attention for 23 seconds, that's a long time, but then that risk paid off. But in general, your first frames, you need to have that locked in. Your first frame is what attracts the attention. And this even goes to long form video, because today your thumbnail on YouTube doesn't actually matter, because most of the views will come from autoplay in your feed. Because if you have the updated YouTube app, it will autoplay now when you're scrolling. So no intro shots, no establishing shots, just go straight to the point and create a great GIF. A couple of examples. So this one, if you take a close look at what's happening there, you know, in the first frame you go, oh, cool pixel art, nice colors, and then why is he throwing a dead body in the river? And the pitch for this one was literally 2 words called Graveyard Tycoon. The game shipped was a title Graveyard Keeper, but literally this specific GIF is what I used to pitch to all major platforms at shows, and we got accepted because of this. We had no game, we had no trailer, just this GIF at that point. But that's the power of just a few frames and a joke that people immediately get. To the example of potion craft, this is one of the GIFs that went viral on Reddit several times. And when you look at it, you just kind of go like, oh, that's satisfying, right? And you can almost hear this GIF with all of the crunching that's going on there. Like the tactility of that, the feeling of satisfying crunch when you make these potions is something you want to try. And this is the example of Streets of Rogue. This is the GIF that we have on the Steam page. And yeah, like I said, the GTA meets Nuclear Throne, and the rest is just goes completely insane. So let's make a good video for your pitch. I'd say that a trailer is great, but a walkthrough of your build might be much easier to make and much more useful, because you kind of want to, well, you want to get funding from a publisher, right? Or from a fund or from whomever you're pitching. But you also want to make their life easier. So most people that make decisions will be on the road many days in the year. Like I travel way too much. And again, your pitch is going to probably be viewed first on someone's phone. So if you have a walkthrough video that shows exactly what the gameplay is, and you know, if it's, let's say, a couple of minutes or maybe up to 10 minutes, that clearly outlines the gameplay, that will make the decision-making process so much faster and easier. And don't be shy about, you know, many people will be kind of like shy about showing placeholder art, showing this and that. Just show where your game build is and show exactly how it plays. This is an example of a milestone build from Kingmakers, which is again a little bit of behind the scenes, but you'll understand why I'm excited about the marketing path for it.
Oh my, it's 2024 and Kingmakers Milestone 10 is finished. People are calling this the year of Kingmakers, and I can't not say they're wrong. So Milestone 10 has full cavalry implementation, the final pillar of Kingmakers combat. We did it, boys. Legions of cavalry can now run down troops, knocking them to the floor using our own custom lightweight physics system. Those still alive can stand back up and try to knock the rider from the horse, all within the GPU-driven Vertex animation system. But the horsemen will come back around, performing wide sweep attacks with their spears without even slowing down. They can also joust against each other, engage with archers, and everything else that's needed to be more or less feature complete. They also look better too, with an improved shader that gives them a silky appearance, despite using a very efficient shader. So they'll look...
You kind of get the idea, right? It goes on for about 10 minutes, and we have a whole backlog of these development blocks that we will then use for marketing, because people today are really interested in how games are made versus what the final result is. So treat these kind of pitches and your milestone videos or walkthroughs as if you were a YouTuber, right? Because if a publisher can put you in front on the marketing and is confident in that, then it makes our job as publishers easier. And we're absolutely fine with sharing the spotlight, and do believe that devlogs, especially if they're funny and original like this, are great, and it will help your pitch. Now, if you have an accent like me, pro tip, hard code subtitles in, because it can be difficult to understand people with accents, and just if you feel like someone is not understanding you, just hard code those subtitles in. There are many software solutions that do it automatically for you. And always upload it to YouTube. Don't use Vimeo with passwords, don't use private links, just YouTube unlisted. The reason for that is because if it's an unlisted naked link, you will get a lot more views because it will be previewable in many email clients. And the YouTube app is just very fast. Like, quite often you'll have a crappy connection when traveling, so just use YouTube. Please use YouTube. So, to summarize, you need a very snappy style, very short description. If we're talking about email, embed the GIF. I use a tool called easygif.com to optimize GIFs, but there are many other solutions that you can use. Make sure that it's under 5 megabytes. Have a naked YouTube link in there. Include any coverage or traction you've had. And it's also important to include the engine that you're using, right? It's probably going to be Unity or Unreal, but sometimes you don't know. And if you're working on an online multiplayer game, include any kind of third-party tools that you're using. Because the first question I have when being pitched a multiplayer game is, well, okay, is it dedicated servers? Is it peer-to-peer? Like, do you have any experience with anti-cheat? Things like that. And include the development plan and budget, which we should probably talk about because I haven't mentioned that yet. Quite simple. Milestones, buffers, schedules, budgets. Make it into a simple one-pager where there is a development plan, overview from beginning or where you are right now until the end, and build in a buffer. This is something that we have learned, well, even before the pandemic. Any publisher will understand that schedules are a fluid situation in game development, let's just say, right? So we know that timelines will skip. So if you already are thinking about that and you have a buffer built in and it's clearly outlined, then it will show the publishing partner that you know what you're doing, that you've shipped games before, because you're talking about things like that. Now, I treat pitching like dating, honestly. Like, if you feel comfortable with someone, if you talk about games that you both love, if you hit it off, then maybe put a ring on it, as in get into a publishing deal. But don't get into toxic relationships, right? If you've ever dated someone whom you weren't comfortable with, how great did it feel when it ended? And how regretful was it that it started? So just think about like, if you hit it off, it's a really good sign. This business is really built by people who are in it not for the money, because there is no money in the industry, but we're still here, right? A couple of hot tips before I finish. We really like time spent as a metric. If your game had a playtest, you will have this graph over here. In your report on Steam, just go into your playtest product, and if you see this, like, send us an email right now, because this is what we want. We want a game where players, or a huge portion of players, spend a lot of time in. I did a long presentation about designing 1,000-hour-long games. It's also on this YouTube channel at DevGam. Just search for designing 1,000-hour games. Did the presentation in Lisbon about emergent gameplay, about why it's super important, and many other publishers and funds and everyone in this industry is realizing that time is the most important metric. Hot tip, don't get into content grind traps. What I mean by that is you can design a handcrafted game with 3 hours of gameplay in a year. Well, how long will it take you to design a 50-hour game? right? Don't think about designing consumable content that players will experience once, because right now it is extremely expensive. Just think about how to design systems that create unique situations. In system-driven design, you can get a lot of content created by players compared to handcrafted, guided experiences. But that's just us. That's just our opinion. Another hot tip, don't be afraid to stop projects. This is something that I found myself doing a lot, is being afraid to stop things that don't work. Because if you think about in other entertainment industries, production cycles are actually much, much shorter. You know, you can shoot a movie in 10 days and be done with post-production in another couple of months and then win awards. That happens in that industry a lot. Animation has a lot more predictable timelines. Yet we spend years on a single project in our careers. So if you think about, you know, if your career is 30 years and on average a game takes, you know, 3, then you have enough time in your career for a dozen projects. So just think about what you should not be doing. And this is why I believe verifying is so important. Is if your idea is not gaining traction, well, maybe stop this project, go do something else, maybe come back to this when you have more resources available to take a bigger risk. And changing direction as well. This is something that I've also been known to do a lot, is as in when we do change direction. There's this meme when, like, don't let Alex into our Discord, because when it comes to game development Discords, I'll just throw a bunch of random ideas in and then they're in the new milestone schedule. But it just, when you're working on something for a year, for 2 years, and you don't feel like it's gaining any traction, any inspiration, it's okay to change direction, because you have learned what will not work or what will not inspire you. Because when you feel it, when you actually find something that works, you do feel it, and people will feel your enthusiasm around you, and hopefully the customers, the potential players, are going to react as well. So this is an actual conversation I had with a lead designer when we were working on a survival game, when he does say that he plays a lot of survival games, and I asked him how many hours does he have in the 2 top ones, and oh yeah, I actually don't play it, I watch YouTube. You just said you play it, but work on what you understand. This industry is built by passion. It's important to understand what you're working on. You can't just put someone that doesn't understand genre X on working on something that you feel is trending. That's also why you shouldn't chase trends. You should create them, because when you have 3-year-long development cycles, well, a trend today is not going to be around in 2 or 3 years. So that's it. Thank you so much. Pitch your game to us. Pitch it to everyone else. There are so many lists. We have pitches@tinyball.com is our email address, and you can follow me on X and criticize this talk. Shameless engagement farming here. Thank you so much.